Hey guys, my name is Sivagamy, safe for sure. Today I'll be talking about The Shining, the book versus the movie. So I've always wanted to get into Stephen King's books, and I thought what a perfect way to start with The Shining, considering it's also a very well-known movie, and I love to read a book and then watch the movie to see if it matches like my expectations. So let me first start off with a quick summary of the book. So it was written in 1977 and the movie was made in 1980. The book actually focuses on a family of three. The dad's name is Jack Torrance, and he's like a struggling writer who works at a school, but due to some events, he has to quit that role and take on the role of a caretaker at a hotel called the Overlook, which is like in the middle of nowhere. His wife's name is Wendy Torrance, and she's like the typical devout and mother and wife to her husband. And they've got a son called Danny, who's like I think 5 years old in the book, and he's got psychic abilities which they call the Shining, which allows him to foresee the future, read people's minds, and also what else does he do? See the dead. He can also see dead people. So I'm going to first start off with reviewing the book. So going in, I had really high expectations considering the author of the book and the fact that 40 years later, we still talk about the book, The Shining, and the movie. And I have to say, I was a little disappointed, just a tiny bit. And that's probably because I love reading thrillers and I love a good plot twist at the end. And I'm like, oh my God, like, did that just happen? So I have to go back a few pages to read and register what just happened. And obviously in this book, that doesn't happen because it's a very classic horror story, which is fine. And I have to say, this is the kind of horror story that does give you goosebumps. And it gives you that suspense that you don't want to, you can't put the book down. You just have to keep reading until you know the end, like what happens at the end. I think the book was very well written by Stephen King. He did a really good job at describing the setting and giving it the atmosphere giving it the atmosphere for a horror story. In the beginning, he talks about Jack being at the interview and Wendy and Danny being back home waiting for him to return from his job, and you can from the start get this sense that they are quite isolated. They've got no one else to rely on apart from each other. So he did a really good job at illustrating the characters to the point where I didn't want one of them to die. But let's face it wouldn't be a horror story if one of them didn't die, right? Something else as well that I picked up on whilst reading this book, alongside with the titles that he gave to the chapters, like for example in the bedroom or in the lobby, is that he kind of wanted, I mean it's just under the impression I was off, but he maybe wanted to get this into a theatre production or a movie, which surprise surprise it did. The reason for that is because, like I said, some of the titles are very not scripted, but very exactly where they happens. For example, like in the bedroom, in the lobby. So obviously it's easier to make a movie according to those chapters and also the long descriptions which I mentioned earlier. So now finally I'll be discussing the movie, which was created 3 years later after the book by Stanley Kubrick, who was the director, And let me start with Stephen King hated the movie. And to be fair, I can kind of see why. I think it'll be interesting to see what other people have rated the movie. So I think we should have a look at that on Google. So I tend to have a look at this one, and it's got 8.5 out of 10. I'm really surprised. That's pretty good. And here it says 88% like this film. So, I mean, I personally didn't like it. With this one, I completely agree with the author. I don't think the movie was that great. It wasn't a true depiction of the book. Let me start off with the performances. So I think Danny was really cute, but it was so weird. So in the book, he mentions that, he can see this little boy called Tony, who allows this through him that he actually can predict the future and see stuff. And in the movie, instead of doing, I don't know, a shadow over him or something, he's doing this throughout the movie. And he's putting on a really weird noise, which is so awkward to watch. And the mother as well, she did a really poor job at depicting Wendy. So I felt like the only good performances were by Halloran. I think that's how you say his name. He was exactly how I imagined it in the book. He's really warm and welcoming. And also Jack Torrance, he was good as well in terms of acting crazy. but it was missing I think it was, you couldn't see how he was prior to the Overlook, which is a shame because then you would have seen the transition of him being like a nice person to then being crazy, which brings me to the fact that there wasn't much of a build up as well to the Overlook Hotel. I think in the book, Stephen King did it, like he did that really well to create that suspense of the hotel, whereas in the movie you don't really get that. Also, something about the movie that I didn't like, which I think most people wouldn't care, was the scene between Halloran and Danny when they have a conversation about The Shining. And in the movie, Halloran tells him not to go to a specific room and doesn't give him the reason why. Just tells him, don't go in there. But there's no reason, there's nothing wrong in there, but just don't go in there. But whereas in the book, Halloran tells him specifically the reasons why he shouldn't go in the room. And I think it just makes more sense. Like, the whole story makes more sense because then you understand why there is a dead woman in the room and like the story behind it. It's not just a random dead woman in the tub. Do you know what I mean? So in the book, there are some scary elements which I was really looking forward to seeing in the movie, but unfortunately they weren't there. So one of them being the topiary animals. If you don't know what topiary means, because I didn't, it actually means like hedges which are shaped into animals. So in the book, there's like big ones I think in front of the Overlook. And when Jack is outside, like in front of them, at one point I think he sees the dog on the left, and then 1 minute later he sees it on the right, which I thought would have been really good to look on, like on screen. Unfortunately, they turned that into a maze, which just wasn't really interesting. The maze wasn't scary at all. It just, I don't know, it wasn't very interesting, was it? Also, like another element was the elevator, which randomly turns on at nighttime whilst they were all sleeping. And also another part, like another scene in the book that I liked was when Danny plays in the field, and I think he plays like in a tunnel, which is really dark and doesn't really see like the end of it, but something grabs him and he tries to like get free of that hold, and like he like runs away. And I thought that was really good, but again, they didn't show it in the movie. Instead, in the movie, they showed like the twins that are like, come, let's play. But like, I don't think that happened in the book. I'm pretty sure it didn't happen in the book. I don't remember that at all. And finally, what I would like to mention was the room. I mean, everyone knows that in the book, the room number is 217, whereas in the movie, the room number is 237. And I thought I would Google that in front of you guys to know the reason behind that. So why was room 217 changed to 237? So the lodge's management asked for the room number to be changed so that guests wouldn't avoid room 217. There is no room 237 in the hotel, so the number was chosen. Fair enough, that makes sense. It makes sense for the hotel because obviously they will lose out on some customers, but I think some people would have loved that to stay in the room, you know, that was filmed after a movie. I think that was a shame that they didn't stick to the same room number in the movie as the book. It was maybe a small element, but you know, if you love reading and you love books that kind of match, at least they match quite closely to the book, then that's definitely an element that you would have picked up on. So guys, that brings us to an end. So which one was better, the film or the movie? No, that makes no sense. I meant to say the book versus the movie, and by far the book has won. The book was actually really good. I would definitely recommend it, but the movie I think was really bad. You have to take into consideration it was made in 1980, so I guess they didn't have the technology and like the editing tools that we have now. But for that reason, I would say the book won. So that brings us to an end. I hope you've enjoyed my review on the book versus the movie for The Shining by Stephen King. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please like this video, comment any books you think I should be reading, and also subscribe to my channel. Lastly, I would like to mention my Patreon page, which I'll be posting the link down in the description box, and that'll be a great way to support my channel. And this is pretty much it. Thank you so much and see you guys soon.